Hey everyone, this is Grant, your friendly OpenShift team member. Today I was playing around with a new command line tool that we've been working on for developers, and I just thought I would record it, give everyone a quick look at some of the things we've been working on. Now, we wanted to create a command line tool that was targeted for developers, those developers who are iteratively developing, making changes. They want to check those changes out, concept of an application. Now, this is all in the context of OpenShift, which is a enterprise distribution of Kubernetes. And what's even better is I'm going to be using the OpenShift Online Pro account for this. So let me go ahead and start up Safari, and we'll just get started here. So let me go to OpenShift.com, and I'm going to sign in to my OpenShift account, and we'll go from there. So let me make this browser full screen for you, and I'm going to click on sign in, and I'm going to log in with my Red Hat account, and I'm going to say gshipley@redhat.com, provide my password here, and it is going to allow me to select which OpenShift online account I want to use. Now I'm going to use Pro US East Virginia for this one. And so once I'm logged in here, you can see the web console. But what I'm going to do is just copy the login command. So that just pasted it to my, or put it on my clipboard. So now I'm going to log in, and you can see my token there. So yeah, I'll probably expire that as soon as this is over. And so what I'm going to do is create a new project with ODO. So ODO is the command line tool. You can see that I am using ODO version 0.7, using OpenShift 3.9 and Kubernetes 1.9. All right, so let's create a new project with ODO. So I can say ODO project create grant demo, and that's going to create a new project for me called grant demo. So now that I'm in this project, what I want to do is create an application. So I can say ODO app create, and let's just call this Wild West game. So now I have an application that's created. So every action that I perform on the command line from here on out is going to be contexted or namespaced to that application. So the first thing I want to do on my local machine is actually get my source code. So I'm just going to make a directory called demo, go into the demo, pop back over to Safari, and go out to GitHub here. So github.com/gshipley. I have a couple of repos in here that I just have been working on. So the first one I want to do is the backend for this. So this is a Spring Boot backend that's going to actually talk to the Kubernetes API and is going to pull objects in from the Kubernetes API server. So let me go ahead and git clone that on my local machine and go into that directory. Okay, now that I am in that directory and my screen has been cleared, the first thing we can do is ODO list, and there are no components that I can deploy right now. So we have our application and we have our project. So, and I have this Git repository cloned locally. So the first thing I would want to do is probably compile it and package it up. So this is going to do a full build of the application. And then if I go into my target directory, we can see that it did indeed build. And let's go ahead and create a new component for this. So let's do ODO catalog list. And I'm going to choose Wildfly for my Spring Boot application. I packaged it as a WAR file. But if you packaged it as a jar file with an embedded Tomcat or Undertow server, you would use the OpenJDK runtime for this. So I'm going to say ODO create Wildfly, which is my runtime, and I'm going to call this game backend. And because this is a Maven project locally where I'm going to be coding, I'm going to be coding and compiling. And so I want to actually deploy the binary artifact of that. So I can pass in the -- binary tag. I know it's in the target directory and it's the root.war file. And this is going to create a component of my application for the back end. Now, if we go back over to Safari and go to our OpenShift web console, we can have a grant demo project. We can take a look here and see what's actually going on. So let me make this a little bit bigger for you. So we don't have any deployments yet, but it is running a build. And let's go ahead and look at the full log of that. And we can see that a few things are happening. It's actually built the image. Now it's pushing that Docker image up to the OpenShift private registry. So let's just let that finish here. We're on layer 9 of 13. And then, of course, the last layer will be the Spring Boot application that we're actually going to deploy when we push it. So let's just let this finish here. Okay, so the push was successful. Now Wildfly is going to actually get started up. So if we go back to the overview, we can see that a new pod has been created. Now this does take a while the first time. Each subsequent deployment of your application will be much faster because the container will already be running with Wildfly deployed. So let's look at the logs here. And once the logs are loaded, we're actually going to do a push of the application. So we can see that it's actually spinning up here. So Wildfly has started. So this is great. So now, as an application developer, if you want to push your code, we have what's called an ODO push command. So once this is finished, I'm just going to go over here to the ODO command again. And if I type ODO push at this point, all that's going to happen is it's going to deploy that WAR file, or in the case of a Spring Boot jar file, it's going to upload that jar file and start the application server running. So if we go back over to the web console and look at the logs, we will be able to see that that has been picked up, and it's actually deploying that Spring Boot application now. We should see the Spring Boot ASCII arc in just a moment here. And here we go. Oh, I screwed it up with my browser. If I go up there, you can see the Spring Boot logs. Okay. So let's go ahead and click follow here. So this will be up and running in just a moment. So if we go back to the overview page of OpenShift, one thing that's missing right now is a route to the application or a URL to the backend server. So to create a backend URL, because I'm in the context of my application and in the context of the game backend, I can just say ODO URL create, and that is going to give me the backend server. So this is the URL for the backend server. If I go over to Safari and open up a new tab here, paste that in, and maybe hit a create game API, we can see that my backend has been deployed. Now, at this point, as a developer, I could go ahead and work on my source code in my IDE of choice and make some changes. So let's go ahead and close down Visual Studio Code, and let's move to the next part of this application, which is the front end. So if I do ODO list at this point, I can see we have a back end. And if I do ODO app list, I can see that I'm in the Wild West game. So the next thing I want to do is add the front end component to talk to the back end microservice. So let me go back to my GitHub repositories and find the Wild West front end. There it is. I'm going to clone this to my local machine with a git clone. Clear the screen, go into the Wild West front end. And now I need to create a new component for this. Now I happen to know that I'm using JavaScript and Node.js, but I can go ahead and do a ODO catalog list and find Node.js. Here it is. Clear my screen, do a ODO create Node.js game front end, and just hit enter. And this will set it up for a source build and push, which is what I want to show you now. When I showed you the Spring Boot application, it was a binary build, meaning that I'm going to run Maven locally on my own system, and once I compile the jar file or the WAR file or the EAR file, if you're doing Jakarta EE, you can just simply push that up to the OpenShift server and it'll figure out what to do with it. So if we go back to our OpenShift web console, we know our back end is working great, and now we can see that our front end is actually performing a build and is pushing the Docker image up to the registry. It's on layer 4 of 6. Once that is finished, you can see the progress down here. A new pod will be created for the front end as well. And then I will make some changes and show you how quickly you can start doing iterative development with ODO after this. So we're just waiting for our pod to come up. And we also need a URL for our front end. Because I'm in the context of the front end now, if I do ODO URL create, it's going to know that I want to create a front end URL. And if I do ODO list, I can see my two components now, a game backend and a game front end. So here is the game front end URL. So I'm going to copy that and go back over to the web UI. And we can see that this is up and running now, and it did create a route for it, and it has set up the initial container. If I click on this, we will see that the application is not available. Why is that? I haven't pushed it yet. So let's go ahead and do an ODO push, and this is going to push my source code from my local machine up to the OpenShift server, and then it's going to run the npm install and do all of the necessary things in order to start my front end application up. So we'll give this a second to finish here, and we can see if it's up and running yet. And here we go. Here's the application. And so this is going to pull Kubernetes objects from OpenShift, talking to that Spring Boot microservice, and allow me to shoot them and kill them in real time. So here's the route. Maybe I want to kill a route. Here's a pod. Kill the pod. My score went up to 2. But again, this is just a game that I have been working on. It's not finished yet, but let me show you the iterative development processes now. Let's say I want to change this title from Wild West Shoot 'em Up. What I can do at this point is go back to my command line, and I'm in the Wild West front end directory. So let me start up Visual Studio Code, and this is going to open up that directory inside of Visual Studio Code. So let me close this, and let me go back to the command line, clear the screen, and show you the ODO or ODO watch command. So what this is going to do is watch my local directory that I have a source build for, and when it notices changes, it's going to push them up to my server. So let's go ahead and edit the index.html file here, and let's see, the heading here is Wild West. Let's change this to Grant Demo or something, and I'm going to hit save. That was Command S. And if I go over to my command, I can see that it noticed that change and it pushed them up. If I go to my browser and refresh my browser, we can see that the game is reloaded and it made that iterative change. So this is how I can use ODO to iteratively develop applications and hook them together and have the context of an application, all while in the same OpenShift web console that you would expect to see. We have an application called Wild West Game, and it has two components, the back end and the front end. Now, if this was a more complicated game and maybe it had some more microservices, they would all show up here. Another great thing about ODO that we're working on is you can do things like add storage, you can link things together, you can look at logs, you can update the source code you want to use. So go ahead and take a look at ODO when you're ready to try it out, and let us know what you think. Thanks a lot.